AWS Administration. Your best choice. Handbook. 4. AWS Admin Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module number 1, Introduction to Cloud Computing. Agenda. What is cloud computing? Why we go for cloud computing? History and origins of cloud computing. Characteristics of cloud computing. Types of cloud services. Software as a service SaaS. Platform as a service PaaS. Infrastructure as a service IaaS. Cloud implementation types. Conclusion info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is cloud service? Services and solutions that are delivered and consumed in real time over internet are cloud services. When you store your photos online, use webmail or social networking site, you will use cloud computing service. What is cloud computing? Cloud computing is a delivery model of computing services over the internet. It enables real-time development and delivery of broad range of products, services and solutions. Cloud computing is a style of computing where massively scalable IT-related capabilities are provided as a service across the internet to multiple external customers. Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is cloud computing? Computing and software resources that are delivered on demand, as service. Applications. Computer. Network. Services. Storage. Database. Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Why we go for cloud computing? Lower computing cost. Improved performance. Reduced software cost. Instant software updates. Unlimited storage capacity. Increased data reliability. Device independence and the always on, anywhere and any place. Free from maintenance and the no need to know info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. History and origins of cloud computing. Launches of Google App Engine, Windows Azure Beta. 2008. Google App 200. S3. 200. Launch of Amazon Web. 199. The first milestone for cloud. The arrival of 196. Supercomputers, main for info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Characteristics of cloud computing info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Characteristics of cloud computing. On-demand self-service. Ubiquitous network access. Resource pooling, advanced virtualization. Rapid elasticity. Flexible pricing pay-per-use info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Characteristics of cloud computing. On-demand self-service. Ubiquitous network access. Resource pooling, advanced virtualization. Rapid elasticity. Flexible pricing pay-per-use info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Characteristics of cloud computing. On-demand self-service. Ubiquitous network access. Resource pooling, advanced virtualization. Rapid elasticity. Flexible pricing pay-per-use info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Characteristics of cloud computing. On-demand self-service. Ubiquitous network access. Resource pooling, advanced virtualization. Rapid elasticity. Flexible pricing pay-per-use info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Cloud service layers. Cloud service layers info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Cloud service layers. Cloud service model comparison info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Cloud implementation types info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Public cloud. Owned and managed by service provider. Made available to the general public or a large industry group info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Private cloud. Operated solely for an organization. May be managed by the organization or a third party. Limits access to enterprise and partner. Network. Retains high degree of control, privacy and security info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Hybrid cloud. Composition of two or more clouds, private, community, or public, bound together by standardized or proprietary technology that enables data and application portability info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Conclusion. Cloud computing is the fastest growing part of network-based computing. It provides tremendous benefits to customers of all sizes. Simple users, developers, enterprises and all types of organizations. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Lab activity info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module number 2 Introduction to AWS. Agenda. What is AWS? Benefits of using AWS. History and origins of AWS. AWS components. AWS services. AWS regions. AWS availability zones. AWS edge locations. AWS certifications info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is AWS? Amazon Web Services, AWS, are a collection of remote services, also called as web service, offered by the Amazon.com over the internet. Build and run an application. Amazon Web Services, AWS, robust, scalable and affordable infrastructure for cloud computing. AWS provide compute, storage and database service, quickly provisioning the IT needs info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is AWS? AWS is a set of cloud computing services. AWS is flexibility, availability, and scalability. AWS is elasticity. Scale up or scale down as needed. We can get resources instantly. AWS is fully on demand info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Benefits of using AWS. Pay-per-use model. You are only charged for disk space, CPU time and bandwidth that you use. Instant scalability. Your service automatically scales on AWS stack. Reliable, redundant. Infrequent outages, so far. Data is redundant in the cloud. All services have built-in security. Security. AWS delivers a scalable cloud computing platform that provides customers with end-to-end security and end-to-end privacy. Most services accessed via simple REST, SOAP API. Libraries are available in all major languages. Minimal learning curve. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Service Level Agreement, SLA. SLA between 99.99 and 100% availability. Amazon S3 maintains a durability of 99.99999%. Availability. Availability zones exist on isolated fault lines, flood plains, and electrical grids to substantially reduce the chance of simultaneous failure. Support. AWS provides 24/7 support in the real-time operational status of all services around the globe info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. History and origins of AWS. Grew out of Amazon's need to rapidly provision and configure machines of standard configurations for its own business. Early 2000s, both private and shared data centers began using virtualization to perform server consolidation. 2003 internal memo by Chris Pinkham describing an infrastructure service for the world. 2006 S3 first deployed in the spring, EC2 in the fall. 2008 Elastic Block Store available. Amazon EC2 now offers Windows Server 2008 info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Various components of AWS info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS Services. Amazon provides the various types of services as below. EC2 Virtual Private Servers. Similar to standard VPSs and are called instances. Available in a variety of sizes, 613 MB to 64 GB of RAM. All major operating systems supported. S3 Cloud Storage. Highly scalable, some companies have PBs of data. Highly available, data is stored in multiple data centers. RDS, Relational Database. MySQL, SQL and Oracle databases. Variety of sizes. High availability available for an extra cost. Read replication. Scheduled backups. Route 53 DNS. High availability. Works well with other AWS services. Fast and secure. Paper Zone and Million Queries info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. CloudFront, Content Delivery Network. Uses a number of global edge locations. Fast. Pay per gigabyte of data transfer, prices vary on the region. Glacier, Data Archiving. Store data for a prolonged period of time, years. Very cheap. Data retrieval takes a few hours. DynamoDB, NoSQL database. High availability. Data stored on SSDs for speed. Pay for number of read, writes per second. Elasticache, Memcache. Cache database results. Available in a variety of sizes. Pay per hours info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS Services. AWS Regions. AWS regions are completely isolated from each other and are in different parts of the world, and AWS regions is a collection of data centers, availability zones or A to Z. Each region has a set number of AZs. All AZs in a region connected by high bandwidth. Cost vary from region to region. Default region in US East info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS Regions. AWS Availability Zones. Note: there is an extra region called the AWS GovCloud region, but this can only be used by government agencies info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS Edge Locations. Edge locations are the important part of the AWS infrastructure. There are currently 40 edge locations. They are located in most the major cities around the world and are used by CloudFront, CDN, and Route 53, DNS, to distribute content nearer to the end user. AWS Certifications info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Lab Activity info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module number 3 Elastic Cloud Computing EC2. Agenda. Introduction to AWS EC2. Benefits of using AWS EC2. Amazon EC2 use cases. AWS EC2 pricing model. AWS instance type. Amazon Machine Image, AMI. Selecting EC2 instance. AWS regions and availability zones. Launching Amazon EC2 instance. Step-by-step info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Introduction to Amazon EC2. Amazon EC2, which is also known as Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, provides resizable computing capacity in the Amazon Web Services, AWS. It is a simple web service interface, allows you to obtain and configure capacity with minimal friction. It provides you with complete control of your computing resources and lets you run on Amazon's proven computing environment. EC2 is the core service of AWS Cloud Platform and launched in 2006. These are the virtual servers, also called as an instances. We can use these instances pay-per-use basis. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Benefits of using AWS EC2. P. Easier and faster. Amazon EC2 reduces the time required to obtain and boot new server instances to minutes, allowing you to quickly scale capacity, both up and down, as your computing requirements change. Elastic and scalable. Quickly add and subtract resources to applications to meet customer demand and manage costs. Avoid provisioning resources upfront for projects with variable consumption rates or short lifetimes. High availability. Amazon EC2 provides developers the tools to build failure-resilient applications and isolate themselves from common failure scenarios. Cost-effective. Consume only the amount of compute, storage and other IT resources needed. No long-term commitment, minimum spend or upfront investment is required. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. EC2 pricing model. Free usage tier. On-demand instances. Start and stop instances whenever you like. Costs are rounded up to the nearest hour. Worst price. Reserved instances. Pay upfront for 1-3 years in advance. Best price. Unused instances can be sold on a secondary market. Spot instances. Specify the price you are willing to pay, and instances get started and stopped without any warning as the mark changes. Kind of like Condor. Dedicated instances. Charge for instance. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS instance type. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Amazon Machine Image, AMI. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Launching an Amazon EC2 instance step by step. Launching an Amazon EC2 instance step by step. Sign up for AWS at Amazon. Apply the service credit you received by email. Create and download a key pair, save it in your home directory. Create a VM via the AWS Console. Connect to your newly created VM like this. SSHI my AWS keypair.pay make to-user at IP address of VM. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Log in to AWS Console. Click on EC2 from Compute Services from AWS Console. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. You can see the EC2 dashboard and all EC2 instance. Click on Running Instances to see the existing running instances. Running Instances. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Click on Launch Instance to create new instance. AWS Regions. Note: there is an extra region called the AWS GovCloud region, but this can only be used by government agencies. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. AWS Regions. AWS Availability Zones. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Select the respective OS image to install. Select the instance type. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. When not to use a EC2. Physical access to the system. Non-supporting operating system. Multicast, manipulation of L2 networking. Disks attached to multiple VMs. You don't want to do system administration. Info siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Lab activity info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module number 4 Identity and Access Management, ING. Agenda. Introduction to Identity and Access Management, IAM. Understanding IAM Console. Creating and managing security group. Creating and managing users. Managing the user passwords and security key ID. Creating and managing roles. Understanding and managing policy. Understanding multi-factor authentication. User login process info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is IAM? IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. IAM is a web services that enable you to manage users and group permissions in AWS. It is targeted at organizations with multiple users or systems that use AWS products such as Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, Amazon Relational Database Service, and the AWS Management Console. Why we go for IAM? To avoid a security and logistical headache. When you create an AWS account, it has permissions to do anything and everything with all the resources. IAM allows you to limit access as needed and gives you the peace of mind that approved people are accessing the right resources in the desired manner. Why we go for IAM? Info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. IAM will allow us to create multiple users with individual security credentials and permissions. With this IAM, each user is allowed to do only what they need to do. Why we go for IAM? Each user in the AWS account must have a unique set of credentials to access the console info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is IAM? Different types of users have different set of permissions. Administrators need to access all AWS resources. Developers need only access on Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, AC2. Info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is IAM? We can use IAM to create a unique user for each employee and define their permissions. What is a group? A group is a collection of IAM users. After you set permissions on a group, those permissions are set to all users in the group. Even if we create user, we need to use groups to set permissions. We need to manage access for number of groups instead of managing access for every individual user. Info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Creating group. Select IAM from AWS Console. Creating group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Creating group. Creating group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Attach the policy. Review the group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Group created. Changing group name. Select group to group actions to edit group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Deleting group. Select group to group actions to delete group. Adding users to group. Select group to group actions to add users to group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Select users to add group info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Creating user. User key ID info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Deleting user. Managing user password info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Managing access keys info. siddhardevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. User default password settings. Understanding roles info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Creating roles. Attaching policy to role info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Deleting role info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Multi-factor authentication, MFA. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA. MFA provides additional security by requiring users to use a password and an authentication code from an external device. MFA is especially recommended for the AWS root accounts and account with administrator permissions since they have access to all your AWS resources. Login process info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Lab activity info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module 5 hash simple storage solution, S3. Agenda. Understanding storage in AWS. Different types of storages in AWS. What is Amazon S3? Functions and concepts of S3. Advantages and disadvantages of S3. Requirement for S3. Understanding pricing of S3. Creating and managing S3 buckets. Creating and managing objects in S3. Uploading objects to S3. Deleting buckets. Deleting objects info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Storages available in AWS. Storage is an important role AWS and find the below storages available in AWS and uses info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is AWS S3? Amazon Simple Storage Service, Amazon S3, is storage for the internet. We can use Amazon S3 to store and retrieve any amount of data at any time, from anywhere on the web. We can accomplish these tasks using the AWS Management Console, which is a simple and intuitive web interface. S3 is designed for remote data storage, low cost, pay as you go, no upfront costs, high availability, high bandwidth, uses Amazon's own networking infrastructure. March 2006. Amazon launched Simple Storage Service, S3, info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Advantages of S3. Info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Use cases. Asset storage and CDN. Data storage. Static side. Backups. Mobile storage backend. File distribution info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. What is bucket? Bucket is a collection of objects. Globally unique id. A ZA to Z0 to 9. Dash. Max 100 buckets, user. No limit on number of objects. Buckets. Equivalent of directories. Single, common namespace across S3. But bucket names can include EGM gateway, backups, presentations. Objects. Equivalent of files. Up to 5G flat in size. Identified by key, == file name, info. sidddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Best practices on naming. DNS compatible. FQDN. Allows for vhost. Watch out for SSL. No dots sad face. Objects. Blob. Don't care about file formats. Metadata can be added, like MIME type. Maximum 5 TB, object. How to access AWS S3 storage. Accessible using simple HTTP URLs. Amazonos bucket, where bucket is a DNS-CNAME record pointing to s3.amazonos.com. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. It maintains the versions of objects stored in S3 and recover in case of data loss. S3 range of classes. S3 standard class for frequently accessed data. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. We can also set up auto policy to migrate data from one class to another class like standards to Glacier, etc. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Security in S3. Access control list. Bucket policy. Key authentication. S3 also offer SSL encryption for data upload and download. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. To sign up for Amazon S3. 1. Go to Amazon and click sign up. 2. Follow the on-screen instructions. Once we log into AWS Console, click on S3 from storage and content delivery. We are in S3 dashboard. We are ready to create a bucket using the AWS Management Console. Every object in Amazon S3 is stored in a bucket. Before we can store data in Amazon S3, we must create a bucket. Note: you are not charged for creating a bucket. You are charged only for storing objects in the bucket and for transferring objects in and out of the bucket. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. To create a bucket. A bucket is a logical unit of storage in Amazon Web Services, AWS, Object Storage Service, Simple Storage Solution S3. Buckets are used to store objects, which consist of data and metadata that describes the data. 1. Sign into the AWS Management Console and open the Amazon S3 console at Amazon. 2. Click Create Bucket. 3. In the Create a Bucket dialog box, in the bucket name box, enter a bucket name. The bucket name you choose must be unique across all existing bucket names in Amazon S3. Note: after we create a bucket, we cannot change its name. In addition, the bucket name is visible in the URL that points to the object stored in the bucket. Ensure that the bucket name we choose is appropriate. 4. In the region box, select a region. For this exercise, select Oregon from the drop-down list. We can choose a region to optimize latency, minimize costs, or address regulatory requirements. Objects stored in a region never leave that region unless you explicitly transfer them to another region. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. 5. Click Create. When Amazon S3 successfully creates your bucket, the console displays your empty bucket in the Buckets panel. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Bucket, subnet, is created. We can create, delete and manage the buckets by action button. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Once we click on bucket properties, we can see all below properties. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Add an object to a bucket. An object can be any kind of file. A text file, a photo, a video and so forth. When you add a file to Amazon S3, you have the option of including metadata with the file and setting permissions to control access to the file. To upload an object. 1. In the Amazon S3 console, click the name of bucket that you want to upload an object to and then click Upload. 2. In the Upload Select Files wizard, if you want to upload an entire folder, you must click Enable Enhanced Uploader to install the necessary Java applet. You only need to do this once per console session. Info. siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. 3. Click Add Files. A file selection dialog box opens. If you enable the Advanced Uploader in Step 2, you see a Java dialog box titled Select Files and Folders to Upload, as shown. If not, you see the File Upload dialog box associated with your operating system. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. 4. Select the file that you want to upload and then click Open. 5. Click Start Upload. You can watch the progress of the upload from within the transfer panel. 6. Click on Action button to manage an objects. 7. Click on Properties to see the object properties and URL to access. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Click on Details to change the storage class. Click on Permission to see and to change permissions. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Module 6 # Virtual Private Cloud. Agenda: Understanding Networking, TCP, IP. Address etc. Understanding Network in AWS. Subnet and AWS Communications. Internet Gateway and Routing Tables. Security Groups and ACLs. CloudFront, Route 53, VPNs, VPGs and Direct Connect. Load Balancing. Auto Scaling Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Understanding the TCP, IP model. Link Layer. Includes device driver and network interface card. Network Layer. Handles the movement of packets, in other words routing. Transport Layer. Provides a reliable flow of data between two hosts. Application Layer. Handles the details of the particular application. IP. Responsible for end-to-end transmission, sends data in individual packets. Maximum size of packet is determined by the networks. Fragmented if too large. Unreliable packets might be lost, corrupted, duplicated, delivered out of order. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. IP addresses. 4 bytes, for example 163.1.125.98. Each device normally gets one, or more. In theory there are about 4 billion available. Routing. How does a device know where to send a packet? All devices need to know what IP addresses are on directly attached networks. If the destination is on a local network, send it directly there. If the destination address isn't local, most non-router devices just send everything to a single local router. Routers needs to know which network corresponds to each possible IP address. Allocation of addresses. Controlled centrally by ICANN. Fairly strict rules on further delegation to avoid wastage. Have to demonstrate actual need for them. Organizations that got in early have bigger allocations than they really need. IP packets. Source and destination addresses. Protocol number. 1 equals ICMP, 6 equals TCP, 17 equals UDP. Various options, for example to control fragmentation. Time to live, TTL. Prevent routing loops. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Field purpose. VERS IP version number. LEN. Length of IP header, 4 octet units. TOS type of service. T-length. Length of entire datagram, octets. Ident. IP datagram ID, for frag, reassembly. Flags don't, more fragments. Frag off. Fragment offset. Field purpose. TTL. Time to live max hash of hops. Protocol. Higher level protocol, 1 equals ICMP. 6 equals TCP, 17 equals UDP. Checksum. Checksum for the IP header. Source IA. Originator's internet address. Dest. IAA. Final destination internet address. Options. Source route, timestamp, etc. Data. Higher level protocol data. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. NAT translation. EC2 Classic vs. VPC Networks. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info: subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. VPC Best Configuration Practices. A virtual private cloud, VPC, is a virtual network dedicated to your AWS account. It is logically isolated from other virtual networks in the AWS cloud. We can launch your AWS resources, such as Amazon EC2 instances, into your VPC. We can configure your VPC. We can select its IP address range, create subnets, and configure route tables, network gateways, and security settings. 1. Create VPC. Log in to the AWS Console. Navigate to Services to VPC to your VPCs. Click Create VPC. When you create a VPC, you specify a set of IP addresses in the form of a classless inter-domain routing CIDR block, for example, 10.0.0.0/16. For more information about CIDR notation and what 16 means, see classless inter-domain routing. You can assign a single CIDR block to a VPC. The allowed block size is between a 28 net mask and 16 net mask. In other words, the VPC can contain from 16 to 65,536 IP addresses. Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. You cannot change a VPC's size after creating it. If your VPC is too small for your needs, you'll need to terminate all of the instances in the VPC, delete it, and then create a new, larger VPC. To create your VPC, go to the Create VPC dialog box, specify the following VPC details and then click Yes. Create CIDR block. Specify the CIDR block for your VPC. I prefer 10.0.0.0/16. Tenancy. Default tenancy. This is for running instances on shared hardware and is free of charge. Dedicated tenancy. This is for running your instances on single-tenant hardware. A $2 fee applies for each hour in which any dedicated instance is running in a region. 2. Create subnets. In the navigation pane, click on Subnets. Click Create Subnet. Before we create a subnet, let's understand the best practices for creating them. You should create subnets across multiple availability zones, with each subnet residing within a single zone. Creating subnets in and launching instances across multiple availability zones will ensure a high availability environment. When creating separate subnets for ELB, EC2 and RDS instances, each tier should have at least 2 subnets across availability zones. Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. For this example, we created subnets using zones US East 1B and US East 1D. These subnets are called private subnets because the instances we launch are not accessible from the internet. In other words, these instances don't have a public IP unless you assign an EIP. App tier. 10.0.1.0/24, Zone B, 10.0.2.0/24, Zone D. ELB. 10.0.51.0/24, Zone B, 10.0.52.0/24, Zone D. Database, RDS. 10.0.11.0/24, Zone B, 10.0.12.0/24, Zone D. Always choose the same availability zones for all tiers. For example, if you choose 2 zones for high availability and use US East 1R and US East 1B, then maintain those same 1A and 1B zones for all tiers. This will minimize data transfer charges because data transfers between instances within the same availability zone are free. 3. Create Internet Gateway. By default, instances that are launched into a VPC can't communicate with the internet. However, you can enable internet access by attaching an internet gateway to the VPC. Go to Internet Gateways in the navigation pane and click Create Internet Gateway. Info. subnets657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Now attach the gateway to a VPC by right-clicking on VPC and selecting Attach to VPC. 4. Create route tables. A route table contains a set of rules, called routes, that determine where network traffic is directed. Each subnet in your VPC must be associated with a route table that will control that subnet's routing. You can associate multiple subnets with a single route table. However, you can only associate a subnet with one root table. Creating a VPC automatically creates a main root table which, by default, enables the instances in your VPC to communicate with one another. Go to Root Tables in the navigation pane and click on Create Root Table. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice as a best practice: create separate root tables for each tier. This will provide more control in maintaining the security of each subnet. Now associate the subnets to the root tables. Click on one root table and go to the Associations tab. Select the subnet and click Associate. Associate each tier's subnet separately to the dedicated root table. Create 3 new root tables. 1. ELB root table. Associate 10.0.51.0/24 and 10.0.52.0/24. 2. APP root table. Associate 10.0.1.0/24 and 10.0.2.0/24. 3. RDS root table. Associate 10.0.11.0/24 and 10.0.12.0/24. Do not associate any subnets with the main root table. Now navigate to the main root table to add a route to allow internet traffic to the VPC. Go to routes and specify the following values. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Destination: 0.0.0.0/0. Target: select Internet Gateway from the drop-down menu. 5. Create security groups. This process is similar to creating an SG security group in classic EC2. Create separate security groups for ELB, App, DB, RDS, and NAT instances. 1. App_SGO1. 2. NAT_SGO1. 3. ELB_SGO1. 4. DB_SG01. Allow inbound rules for ELB, DB and APP to suit your needs. We'll address NAT security group rules later in this post. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. 6. Create NAT instance. Instances launched into a private subnet in a VPC cannot communicate with the internet unless you assign a public IP or EIP to the instance. However, assigning a public IP to an instance will allow everyone to initiate inbound internet traffic. Using a network address translation (NAT) instance in your VPC enables instances in the private subnet to initiate outbound internet traffic. Create a subnet with netmask 10.0.0.0/24 for NAT instance. Refer to section number 2 of this post. We call this subnet a public subnet and the others private subnets. While, technically, there is no difference between public or private subnet, for clarity we call publicly accessible instances public subnets. Associate this subnet to the main root table. You can also create separate root tables to associate to the subnet. If you do create a separate root table, don't forget to add a route that will allow internet traffic into the subnet. Refer to section number 4 of this post. Now navigate to Services to EC2 to launch instance. In the Launch Wizard, select Community AMIS and search for AMI VPC NAT. Select the first AMI from the results list to launch the instance into the VPC created in section number 1. Choose the subnet 10.0.0.0/24 and then check the Assign Public IP box. You can also assign an EIP, if needed. On the Configure Security Group page, select an existing security group and select the NAT_SG security group that you created earlier. For this example, we created a microserver. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Choose a NAT instance type based on your intended workload. If your application only occasionally needs to connect to the internet and doesn't require high network bandwidth, then a micro instance will suffice. If your application talks to the internet continuously and requires better bandwidth, then start with M1, medium instances. You may need to upgrade the NAT instance to M1, large, because network I/O varies between instance types. Now, deselect the Source Destination checkbox, right-click on the NAT instance, select Change Source Dest. Check, and click on Disable. The NAT instance must be able to send and receive traffic from sources or destinations other than itself, so you'll need to deselect the source, destination checkboxes. Now navigate to Security Groups to add rules for inbound traffic. Go to the Inbound tab for NAT_SGO1. These rules will allow app service to talk to the NAT instance on the 80 and 443 ports. 1. Select HTTP from the Create a New Rule list. In the source box, specify the IP address range of your private subnet, app server subnets, and then click Add Rule. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. 2. Select HTTPS from the Create a New Rule list. In the source box, specify the IP address range of your private subnet, and then click Add Rule. Click Apply Rule Changes. Now navigate to route tables and select the private subnets 10.0.1.0/24 and 10.0.2.0/24. On the Routes tab, specify 0.0.0.0/0 in the destination box, specify the instance ID of the NAT instance in the target box, and then click Add. If you don't need an additional instance for NAT, you can minimize cost by assigning a public IP to the instance that needs internet access. That will allow the instance to access the internet directly. 7. Create app servers. Now go to Services to EC2 to launch instance. On the Configure Instance Details page, from the network list choose the VPC that you created previously and select your app server subnet, 10.0.1.0/24, 10.0.2.0/24, from the subnet list. Optional. Select the public IP checkbox to request that your app instance receive a public IP address. This is required when you don't have a NAT instance, but your instance requires internet access. On the Configure Security Group page, select the option Select an existing security group and then select the app_SG01 security group that you created previously. Click Review and Launch. Now log into the server and check to see whether or not you can access the internet. $ping google.com. You now might ask, how can I access from my desktop an instance that was created in a private subnet and has no assigned public IP? The answer is that you can't. To do so, you'll need a bastion box in the public subnet. You can use a NAT instance as a bastion server, also known as a jump box. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Log into the Bastion NAT server first. You can access any instance from this server that was created in a private subnet. For more details, see here. 8. Create RDS. Navigate to Services to RDS. Go to Subnet Groups in the navigation pane and click Create DB Subnet Group. Select the VPC ID from the drop-down menu. Select Availability Zone and choose the subnet IDs of 10.0.11.0/24 and 10.0.12.0/24. Then click Add. Click Yes, Create to create the subnet group. Creating an options group and a parameters group is similar to doing so in classic EC2. Launch an RDS instance within the subnet group created above. In the additional config window, select the VPC and DB subnet groups created previously. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. To make sure that your RDS instance is launched in subnets 10.0.11.0/24 and 10.0.12.0/24, select the MYDB subgroup O1 subnet group. All other steps for creating an RDS are as usual. 9. Create ELB. Now it's time to create the load balancer. The load balancer will be the front end and will be accessible from the internet, which means that the ELB will be launched in public subnets 10.0.51.0/24 and 10.0.52.0/24. At this point, the two subnets can't access the internet. To make them public subnets, update the route table that these subnets are associated to. Navigate to Services to VPC to route tables. Select the ELB route table. On the Routes tab, specify 0.0.0.0/0 in the destination box, select the Internet Gateway in the target box, and then click Add. Navigate to Services to EC2 to load balancers. Click Create Load Balancer. In the Launch wizard, select Create LB inside as your VPC ID. Do not select Create an internal load balancer. Click Continue. In Add EC2 instances, select the subnets where you want the load balanced instances to be. Select 10.0.51.0/24 and 10.0.52.0/24. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. In the next window, select Choose from your existing security group and then select the ELB_SG01 security group that you created previously. Click Continue. In the next window, select the app servers. Click Continue. Review the details and click Create. Make sure that you've enabled the app_SG01 inbound ports 8443 to ELB_SG01 so that the ELB can route traffic to backend app servers. Also make sure that ELB_SG01 HTTP and HTTPS ports are publicly accessible 0.0.0.0/0. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com. AWS Administration. Your best choice. Info: siddevops657@gmail.com.